Have you ever done anything spontaneous? Have you ever just done something on a whim? I'm not necessarily talking about getting married in Vegas to somebody you met that night, but maybe you've quit your job without having another job in place. Maybe you've met somebody and you got the courage to ask them out on a first date. Maybe you just decided to quit your job and buy a van and drive across the United States. Those kind of spontaneous things to me are just crazy. I'm the kind of person that wants a plan. I want to know what's going to happen. And when I see people who are spontaneous like that, my first thought is that they're unreliable, that they're flaky, that they're untrustworthy. Because what kind of person would just quit their job and start following some other guy, a rabbi, following Jesus? And this is early on in Jesus's journey in ministry, and he may have a reputation, but he's just establishing who he is. And so these guys in these verses get introduced to Jesus, and they spontaneously decide to follow him. I assume that there was something about Jesus that they knew that when Jesus said, "Come follow me," they could trust him. But in these verses, in Mark chapter 1, verse 16 through 20, we see this take place. One day Jesus was walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee. He saw Simon and his brother Andrew throwing a net into the water, for they fished for a living. Jesus called out to them, "Come and follow me, and I will show you how to fish for people." And they left their nets at once, and they followed him. A little further up the shore, Jesus saw Zebedee's sons, James and John, in a boat repairing their nets. He called them at once, and they also followed him, leaving their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men. Now just imagine going about your day, doing your job, and somebody inviting you on an adventure, inviting you to follow them. Not knowing exactly where you're going, exactly where that road left. Would you follow them?
So here we go again, looking at the life of Jesus. And Jesus is starting to assemble his team on the dock, kind of like Nick Fury coming in on the scene, putting the Avengers together. But he's not Nick Fury, he's Jesus. But really, Jesus starts to build his disciples. And see, disciple is one of those words that we kind of need to understand what it means. Disciple simply means someone who follows or is a student of. So Jesus is putting together some students, some followers. These 12 men that are most famous are grouped together. They follow Jesus, and they are fishing. They follow his life. They give up everything to follow his teachings and his philosophy. See, Jesus has this unique sense about him. He carries his character with him wherever he goes, and he teaches with this authority that we've seen, unlike anyone ever has before. So these men encounter something completely unique when they meet Jesus. But it's important to remember that Jesus is not just starting this conversation cold. See, he's actually building relationships with normal, everyday people. He's just making himself available, and these are the few people we get to see him interact with, but he's really just building relationships. And we have this blessing of hindsight where we can look back and see that and just know that these are the men that Jesus is picking. We know how the story ends. We know there's 12 of them. But to the first culture there, to these guys, they didn't really know what was going on. God is telling this story. So they began to follow him simply because they had a relationship with him. Jesus took the time to get to know him. And if we actually take a look at the harmony of the Gospels, if we line them all up, all four of them, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, and we see that Jesus actually builds this relationship. This probably isn't the first time for many of the disciples meeting Jesus. Yeah, there are a few that this is the first time, but for the majority of them, they knew Jesus. See, so much of our understanding of the gospel and living life that follows Christ's example, we base off the idea that we constantly have to be talking about Jesus. But that's not really what we see Jesus doing. Jesus comes and enters into a relationship with these men and invites them onto something completely different. A cold invitation could set up actually some pushback for these guys. They're fishing. This is all they've ever known. And Jesus is just coming on the scene and saying, hey, I know I got this crazy idea. Let me know what you think about it. But what if you put those nets down and just followed me? Well, how would we feel about that? We'd probably respond like, I don't even know you. What do you mean follow you? Where are we going? We getting lunch? Am I coming back? My mom always told me not to go off with strangers, right? We don't understand this, but he's more concerned, Jesus is more concerned with living a life in connection with people that reflects Jesus's beliefs than he is talking about his beliefs. So he's more concerned about sharing life and modeling these beliefs than he is about just telling them about his beliefs. And we as people tend to get it backwards. We jump from flying the flag or changing our social media post before we even have one conversation with a human being. We want to tell the culture around us what our belief system is and what our lens is before we build that relationship. But there's actually a better way to do that, and that's through relationship. Pushing all that stuff aside and just becoming connected to another human. It's through relationships that Jesus brings about change. It's through these relationships that he is able to say, why don't you give up your day job and follow me? While we're busy telling others what our life and our lens is, or while we're busy telling everybody around us who our tribe is, we are actually missing out on learning who their tribe is. Where do they come from? See, Jesus built connections and then called them to follow. Some of his disciples, now he did have a cold invitation, but if you notice those cold invitations, they knew somebody that already was a disciple of Jesus. They had a relationship to the inner circle, if you will. So there was always this trust built. See, that's how influence works. And in fact, there's a saying in business, you might have heard it, it's called know, like, and trust. Meaning that we as consumers or we as business individuals will do business or buy a product or a service through people we know, we have an established relationship with, from somebody we like. We maybe not are going to be best friends, but we like this individual enough to say, yeah, I'll enter into this agreement. And we do these things with people we trust. There's a certain feeling we get, like this guy is going to do what he says he's going to do. Know, like, trust. It doesn't have to be overly creative. And in fact, that's exactly what Jesus builds. He lets his disciples know, before they're even his disciples, who he is, that he's a likable guy. See, sometimes I think we feel that Jesus was always just teaching. He had a Bible in his hand, yet it wasn't written yet, but he had the full copy, and he was just teaching the entire time. But he's a likable guy. And he's asking the disciples, before they know they're disciples, to trust him. They know Jesus. They just know him, and they're comfortable leaving the nets behind. But Jesus strategically picks these followers. He knows exactly who they are. He's had conversations with them. So here, Jesus is asking these guys to give up everything they have ever known. Many of these guys are just average fishermen. They've never done anything else in their life. They've only known fishing. They grew up on the boat. As soon as they were old enough to walk and they could walk on 2 feet, Dad said he was old enough to keep his balance in a fishing boat. And these boys grew up mending nets. They grew up cleaning the nets, early mornings, getting out there before the sun got too hot, and then late nights mending these fishing nets, all to get whatever fish they had into a basket, collecting it all up and taking it to market. This is their job. And it's actually a competitive market. There's a lot of other fishermen out there doing this. This is how they feed their family. And they don't know what else to do. They're chasing a paycheck without any guarantee that it's going to be there. So Jesus asked them to leave all of that behind. No guaranteed paycheck for what? No guaranteed paycheck. There's no promise here. Just follow me. Why? Because you know me and you trust me. He tells them that he would make them fishers of men. That famous scripture right there that he says that you enjoy fishing, but follow me and I will make you fishers of men. Fishers of humanity is more accurate. But he calls them to take their life, leave it behind, give up the net, and follow him. Now think about that. It's a scary proposition. You're trading a risky, business-heavy, competitive-heavy market that you're feeding your family with, and you basically are going to a bigger risk of, there's actually no pay here. This has not been monetized. We're completely trusting everything God has for us here. That's a risk. To trade it all and make this change, just in the matter of a conversation walking on the beach. That has to feel similar to the way we feel when we know there's plenty of work to be done, but God's calling us to something different. But I'm too busy over here, and God is asking you to maybe change your focus. Fishers of men. The original word for come and follow me is actually show me. It means a few things. It means to make ready, to make something out of nothing. But I gravitate to a couple of phrases. The first phrase is to prepare. We've been talking about preparation the last couple of weeks, but preparation for what? For what Jesus is doing. See, Jesus is inviting these people to leave the water and enter into relationship with more humanity, to leave the sea of fish and enter into the sea of humanity with no real motivation or connection on how the preparation looks. It's a risk. He wants them to be involved with the preparation. He's not going to give them the plan. They are the plan. This is the plan. Follow me. Just do what I do. If you see me do it, feel free to take it and copy it. You don't have to give me credit. You can do this. For what? To begin to prepare the hearts and the minds for something bigger, something groundbreaking, something that the earth cannot even hold, the resurrection. See, the other definition that I gravitate to is to become an author. Jesus is inviting them to be part of the story, not a role in the story, but to join him in writing the story. Giving them the tools that allow them to do exactly what he can do, because he in turn knows, likes, and trusts the disciples to do exactly what he can do. I guess that's what I find completely breathtaking about this story. That Jesus is also picking average people that are concerned about their family life and their work and their industry And those are the people he wants. He's not calling somebody who's just sitting there waiting for a task. He's asking somebody who's already busy doing something. That's just crazy. For the disciples, it was leaving everything they knew in order to follow a guy that they had just a few months' relationship with. And when the time was right, Jesus asked them. Now, they have no idea of the miracles or the lives that are going to be changed or the people that are going to be healed or the people that are going to actually be raised from the dead. They have no idea that part of the story is yet to come. They just accepted an invitation based off of conversations, based off of a relationship. Jesus was just a normal, everyday guy. And he's just asking normal, everyday people to follow him. And they took the risk.
Have you ever been challenged by the fact that Jesus walks up to these guys and they just drop their nets and they leave? Just leave absolutely everything that they know? That challenges me. It just kind of blows me away. How in the world could people just do that? And don't forget, Peter is married. So how in the world did that conversation go? Hi, honey, I met a guy and I'm going to go follow him for 3 years. I'm out. Peace. I'm sure that conversation didn't go very well. Just the thought of leaving absolutely everything to follow Jesus. Wow, that's a thought that just blows me away. See, in our culture, that just doesn't seem right? And I think in order to find the answer, we have to actually look at their culture and not ours. There's some things that I think are very relevant to this conversation. See, in Jesus' day, when someone wanted to be a disciple, they would actually go up to the rabbi and say, "May I follow you?" And the rabbi has to determine in that moment whether or not this person is worthy enough to be their disciple. And so it would be qualified by a couple of things. First of all, the rabbi would have to determine, could this disciple become like me? See, there's a difference between a student and a disciple. A student wants to know what the teacher knows, but a disciple wants to become who the rabbi is. And so these disciples would dedicate themselves into becoming exactly who the rabbi is. And so they would follow them everywhere because they would want to literally be them. And so they would want to watch how they eat and how they interact with somebody. They would even follow them into the bathroom because they didn't want to miss anything. They want to be who the rabbi is. Can you imagine what it must have meant and felt like to be those guys? I mean, they're not intellectual giants. They're not influential people. They're not rich. They're not wealthy. They're just regular blue-collar, hard-working men who are just doing their job. How powerful was it for Jesus to say, "You can become just like me"? I think it must have really made a big difference for Peter. Peter is the oldest of the disciples. He's at least over the age of 20. Peter is married. So Peter is settled into life. He's like, I'm doing the family business of being a fisherman. This is as good as it gets for Peter. This is life. It's never going to change. It's never going to get any better. This is just me. And then all of a sudden, Jesus arrives on the scene and he says, you can actually be more than what you are. You can actually become like me. Now, they knew Jesus, right? This isn't the first time that they met. They knew him. They knew his reputation. They'd seen him do miracles. They knew who he was. And so for Jesus to arrive on the scene and say, hey, Pete, you can be just like me, that had to just blow him away. It had to be so life-altering to say, I don't have to settle for this life. I can actually be more. So what did they end up doing? They ended up taking their nets and leaving them right there. Why? because they knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that their rabbi believed in them. They didn't have to prove anything to Jesus. They didn't have to try to earn this relationship with Jesus. They didn't need to have to prove that they were worthy enough to be his disciples. They already had Jesus' faith. They already knew their rabbi believed in them. And you know, the amazing part of that is when you and I come to faith, when you and I become followers of Jesus, we become his disciples. It is really an invitation that says that Jesus believes in you. We didn't pick Jesus. Jesus picked us. And when he picked us, he says, you can become just like me. You can become just like the rabbi. How does that change your perspective? How does that change your belief in yourself? Knowing how much God believes in you. Let's talk about that.